Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Product Coalition European Tour, where today I'm really excited to be joined by an old friend, I'd like to say, David Sipio. Welcome, David.
Hello, Jay. Good to have you here. Good to be here. Thank you.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. I'm really looking forward to us talking about designing behaviour, David. I know you've got a very special background, is what I consider it. So I'm really looking forward to talking some more with you. And for those listening, because of the whole COVID-19 situation, this is a remote podcast recording. So apologies if there are any sound issues or dropouts. We're doing our best to create as much value as possible, regardless of the situation. Now, I'm currently in Europe, originally from Australia, in Melbourne, with David. And I originally was planning to meet over 50 product leaders to gain insights, knowledge, and experience from them to share with you, the global product coalition community. However, because of the COVID-19 situation, I'm switching back to these remote podcasts and hopefully giving you value from all over the world instead of just Europe. Now, the tour and every single podcast episode is dedicated to raising awareness and support for the bushfire-affected communities and wildlife in Australia. Those communities will be even more affected by the lack of tourism dollar about to hit them in the year 2020 due to COVID-19. So if you'd like to support the communities of Australia or the volunteer firefighters or the wildlife impacted by bushfires, you can do so over at bushfire.productcoalition.com. If you just discovered the Product Coalition, we're a global product community with over 500,000 readers, 6,000 Slack members, and thousands of podcast listeners. To find out more about us, you can head over to platform.productcoalition.com. Now, before we get stuck in, I do need to give a huge thanks to some brands and individuals that have been major donors to the tour fundraiser over at bushfire.productcoalition.com. First up is UserPilot. UserPilot is a code-free user onboarding and adoption tool designed especially for product management teams. UserPilot helps to increase conversion, user retention rates, and reduce churn by guiding new users to their first aha moment with interactive walkthroughs, contextual product tours, and onboarding checklists. It allows product managers to build fully customizable, behavior-triggered in-app experiences with a simple visual editor. You can head over to userpilot.com to grab a demo and a free trial. Shobit Chugh is a Google product manager. Shobit helps product managers become product leaders and have careers they can be proud of. Go to intentionalproductmanager.com and sign up for Shobit's free class on habits that turn product managers into exceptional product leaders and help them move through their careers fast. Product-led teams like Mixpanel and Flexport know that the best time to capture engagement is when a user is already inside the product. That's why they use Chameleon to drive feature adoption, build onboarding flows, and gather user feedback. You can give it a go over at trychameleon.com/success. Thank you to those brands and also to Rich Mironoff, Chris Miles, and James Woodley for their support as well. David, designing behavior. Let's go.
Yeah, what an intro. Thank you. Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks, Jay.
So really looking forward to chatting through. For the audience listening, I think, David, we probably crossed paths, I think 2015 was the first time.
I was actually just reflecting on that, Jay, and we had a coffee down at 150, I think, Lonsdale Street, which is the Telstra. We're both wearing a Telstra, and I remember having a coffee with you, and I was just blown away with your excitement for product. And me too, I was also very hungry to learn more about product, and I was like, I knew there was something that was going to be, long lasting. And, here we are 5 years later, chatting on a podcast. So quite honest.
Yeah, always enjoyed every moment with you along the journey, David. As I say, your background has particularly always been really interesting to me and what you bring to UX and product and the whole space. So really looking forward to this session. So David, would you mind giving the audience a bit of background and a bit of your story, mate?
Yeah. Thanks, Jay. Yeah, totally. So when Jay says that my background's a bit unique, it's because I'm a psychologist by trade, who then later found technology quite interestingly. So I started studying human resources and change management and leadership, but then through my organizational psychology masters, but then started to realize there was a massive gap in my training, which was around technology. And I thought, in today's day and age, how can we be learning about people without learning about technology? So that set me on a very different path to all my friends, I suppose, who also studied psychology. And I took a job, one of my first jobs in a product, as a product manager, actually, and / UX research at a company called OzMed, which is a health tech company. So that started my journey. I think had I not taken that first leap, which was a bit of a leap, and everyone was saying, "Why did you do that?" I probably wouldn't be where I am today, which is in a really exciting role, working with technology and making real differences through products and services digitally. I'm currently now working at ANZ and having quite a lot of fun there, helping lots of Australians with their finances. ANZ, for those listening globally, is one of the big four Australian banks, and there my key focus is really research and design, as well as strategy with our products.
I'm so glad from that coffee 5 years ago that you've taken this path. I remember that first time just talking about psychology and UX, and I was leading UX on a product at the time and product design, and it was such a great conversation. And your energy there was so good, and I'm so glad you followed it through, and you found your fit, you found your thing.
Well, thanks, Jay. I think, you also were one of those people that were pivotal at that time as I was thinking about making that shift. Do you know what I mean? As I was taking that role, my first role, and then I was like, oh, I wonder if this is for me. But then as I spoke to more people like yourself who were very friendly and very giving and very helpful, I probably haven't shared this with you before, but, you were one of those people that stood out to me, as well as, a few others around me. But yeah, that really helped motivate me to want to really pursue this path.
Well, thank you, mate. I really, really pleased to hear that. It made me smile. Oh, nice. Thank you. No, that's great to hear. It's great to hear. I'm glad I encouraged you and you ended up enjoying it, as opposed to I encouraged you and then you ended up hating it. So,
no.
That's good. That's good. Was there a particular moment when you went all in on deciding to apply your skills in psychology to online?
Yeah, there was actually. And it was in that first role that I was talking about, health tech company. So they had a real problem, which was that they didn't have anyone reflecting on their learning, because they're like an education learning platform, and they needed people to reflect on their learning in order to be compliant with AHPRA, which is the Australian health regulation body, right? So they sort of tasked me with this challenge, how can we get people to reflect on learning that they've done on our platform? Basically applied psychology questions, tools, worked with their team as well, because I can't do this all alone, right? So with the dev teams, worked with them to build a tool that actually helped people reflect on their learning. So when I started, like I said, it was like 0 people reflecting. When we ended, or after about a year of being there, we had 5,000 people roughly actually, reporting and reflecting on their learning. Now, look, that was say 3 years ago now, and there's many more thousands of people now using that tool. But that there showed me the power of, wow, human behavior, some questions that I've learned in psychology with some research with some customers, and this tool that's digital can have huge impacts in society. And that was when the penny dropped.
Yeah, I love it. I do remember that sort of time as well was design thinking, human-centered design. Some of these the whole research side of product development was gaining a lot more mainstream attention from organizations around, particularly in Australia where we were, but around the world. And, that research side of product development and design was always fascinating to me. I think for many of us in product or UX around that time, we all felt a little bit like imposters, maybe. And it's been a heavy amount of research activity, or come from a research background. It was, we're getting into the space, but are we doing it the right way? And so it's great to hear someone like yourself that comes from a heavy research sort of background, being able to apply that. When you're out looking, using, experiencing products, is there been any key experiences where you've really been persuaded or motivated to do something because of a tactic used, or a design pattern used along your journey? Is there any stand-up moments?
It's a really good question, and there's lots that are happening. But there's one that really stood out to me recently, because I've been watching Netflix, a little bit of Netflix, and I was watching this episode. It was quite action-packed, and then once we finished this season, and it was about, 10 episodes or something. We didn't watch that all in one day, by the way, but it had been over a couple of weeks. Not into binge watching Netflix. Lockdown. But then straight after, there wasn't any sort of gap. But then a movie very similar to the one I'd just been watching, which was called Fauda, which was the series. Then Extraction came up, which was this very action-packed movie, which seemed very much aligned to the other movie I just watched. And that there, and I was just watching this trailer, and I was like, oh, wow, that movie looks amazing. But sort of the researcher / design product mind of mine said, oh, this is very interesting. Why am I finding this so interesting? Is it because I've just finished watching that episode and it was really action-packed and I want more of that? Or would I have seen the same way had I just been normally going through my day? And I think the answer is probably the first one, which is I was sort of primed, right? And I was motivated. And it's good in a way. And I think that's great because now I'm thinking I want to watch that movie called Extraction. But part of me is also like, it's getting a bit borderline, right? It's getting a bit borderline manipulative. I'm keen to hear your thoughts though. Like, have you had that experience with these sort of platforms or anything else?
Yeah, look, I think two things on that. What's interesting for me on this point is this is talking about persuasion design, but then also combining it with data science. And when I think about those two powerful concepts joining forces, that's like Avengers Endgame. You know, that's the beauty of why these products are so powerful, of keeping you attached, why they're able to keep their churn down, while they're able to create emotional advocacy when people talk about it, like you were just then, you know. And so, I love this space. I'd say, let me have a think. So the experience of things like that, it's also, I take a step back and think, I see what they're doing here. And then, but what I like asking myself is, how would I do it any different if I would at all? What could I do different? How could I take what they're trying to do with me and improve that? And I think the interesting point that you touched on there is, where are the ethical boundaries in that? If they know you've been watching for 10 hours, I know you said you hadn't, but if you had, would that still have happened? Would they have still have suggested, how about another movie? And how do we as product people think about that strategically and tactically? And how do we start to make decisions and try and create influence around what we're deciding, where that ethical boundary is or isn't? That's to me the next level of product management for the years ahead. And persuasion design and all of these things is, you know, we talk about dark patterns, but is there also some grey patterns that are a little bit in between? I don't know.
Totally. Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that, because we just ran a workshop last month on dark patterns through the UX psychology community. And we did start to touch on the Amazon experience, for example. And there was a great DB results consultants came in and they ran this workshop for us, and it was fantastic, right? It was actually very interactive. And what we explored was trying to exit the Amazon experience. I don't know if you've ever tried to do that, but it's very difficult to cancel your subscription with Amazon.
Yep.
And some of those techniques that were being used in there, they weren't totally dark, but they were kind of grey. You know what I mean? And it's a very interesting point. But I think another thing to add to your point, which was around choice. So if you've just watched 10 hours, I feel like there should be like a circuit breaker to help you choose, right? Whether or not you want to watch another hour or two, right? But then how much of that is actually will, or is it just total submission? Like, I've watched 10 hours and I can't do anything else now. So I think it's a watch this space, right? As technology gets better, like the analytics and the design gets better. Yeah, it's all, who knows?
Can I ask,
it's exciting.
What with regards to the psychology, training, research, and experience you've had now over the years, and you're stood in a workshop and you're designing and working through a product experience, what do you think is going through your head that might be different to, I don't want to say the average UX designer, but someone who's come from a pure design only background? What's different, do you think, about the psychology angle that you bring?
It's a great question, Jay, and I get this question quite a bit.
Right.
I suppose the difference is and I don't mean to like knock design as well at all, but design is very focused on making the product, usable. Look good, but also touched on usability a bit, right? A lot of the great designers I've worked with are focused on making things look great, colors being good, alignment, etc. And that's generally the discussion I have, right? But there's another element to that, which is the research side of things, which is another layer, right? You then incorporate research, and some of the designers I work with also incorporate research. It's great. But then there's one other element, which is a bit of understanding around human behavior and research and principles that help motivate that more. So I'll give you an example, right? So design, you might design a flow, for example, to onboard or to do something like that, right? The research will then say people are not going through that flow correctly. They feel a bit lost. Okay. So the research shows that you want to add like a progress meter, right? But then the psychology will then show that, if you add maybe a little bit of scarcity in that flow, or some language that, taps into some sort of other emotion, or maybe encourages them, right? You then get further completion. So I suppose it's that layered effect, right? You can still get great outcomes with the design. You can also just get great outcomes with design and research. But then if you just add that other layer, which is that psychology and the research in psychology, you can get even better results. I suppose that's the way I like to see it.
Yeah, nice. Have you found yourself questioning your own tactics and what you're applying to persuade people to do things at any point?
Yes, Jay,
Yeah,
that's
really?
another really good question. It's a good one, and I have been questioning it. And I suppose where I draw the line is, am I being transparent with what I'm getting people to do? And am I actually helping people do something they already needed to do? Or am I going to introduce something that they didn't even need?
Right.
And that's where I start to sort of question things. When did I question something like this? Ooh. I think it was when, and I won't name companies or anything, but when we actually were creating incomplete states to help motivate people to complete things.
Right. Okay.
So, and that become hugely important for the business to get information that they needed, like maybe just correct names or correct emails, right?
Yep.
Or correct titles to help our sales team. But part of me was like, why? What's the benefit for the user here? And I started to question, maybe is the business profiting more from this than the user from having this incomplete state? So that's an example of where I started to question that.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
That's all right.
It's so great and so refreshing to someone who comes at the same problems, but from a different angle completely.
Yeah.
On your journey, David, have you met someone else that's also come from psychology into UX or product design?
I've met a few. Like one of my best mates, I think, who's also motivated me. We were both studying organizational psychologist.
Right.
He also is working in like UX, product, and Uber. So, we're on a similar path, him and I. But outside of that, look, there's a few, like through the likes of LinkedIn and Facebook and all that. I've connected with people in the UK a guy called Nick Fine, who I follow. He's also a UX psychologist.
Right. Okay.
So there are a few out there. But
like Jedi's.
Like Jedi's.
Jedi's. Somewhere there's a baby Yoda.
But I suppose that's what's inspired me, right? To build the community and go virtual and maybe even start a podcast soon too. Or no, we are starting a podcast soon.
Committed.
To connect, with all these people around the world thinking a little bit like you and me, and talking this way.
Let's jump into that building community. So talk us through some of the background here with regards to the name of the community and how you got got it going.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So that there is, so I've run a community called UX Psychology, and we have about 4,000 members within Melbourne and Australia, I'd say. So each month we run a workshop, a practical workshop that teaches practical skills about human behavior, technology, or design, and we get people from all walks of life coming from that, all parts of the digital landscape. It's been, it's grown. People get a lot of value out of it. And I think one of the main things people say to me and the feedback they give me is that these workshops are great because they're practical and we learn something practical that, each time we come here. It's not just a talk. We're not just talking. I can actually take what I'm learning in here and take it to work tomorrow. There's that element, but there's also the element of connection. So our workshops are designed so that people are actually connecting and meeting one another.
Awesome. What are you enjoying most about that community? I mean, I've got my story, but tell me about some moments that you're fond of, if you look back, that really make you smile.
That's a good question, Jay. You're really good at these questions. You're making me really go back in my brain, and really, I like it. I think one of the first moments was when I was totally just at the inception of the idea. And I was actually staying up late the night before, having published the event, cooking and making food for my meetup that was going to be the next day.
Right.
And I put it in my car and I was ready. And then everyone started to come. And there was probably about 30 people at my first meetup at RMIT in Melbourne. And I was like, oh, holy moly, I got some validation for this thing called UX and psychology. Just mix them together and whew, there we go. We got people and we got the speakers and this is a thing now. Like, oh, so that was probably one of the first. And then I think second was when we reached, like well over 1,500 members in Melbourne, and people, for example, when I started at ANZ, were like, oh, hey, you're the guy who runs, UX psychology. I've come to some of your workshops. I've learned heaps and I want to come back. When's the next one? And that for me was like, oh, that's really lovely to be acknowledged for the hard work that I'm doing for the community.
Awesome.
So, there's some of the highlights for me, I suppose.
Nice. Are you still cooking for the monthly session?
No, not anymore.
You live in a high life, fully catered.
Well, the thing is now, a lot of our meetups are virtual, so we don't have to provide. Everyone brings their own drinks and nibbles.
There's no Uber Eats for everyone.
There's no. Maybe one day, but no, not at the moment.
Do you remember what you cooked for that first meetup? Do you remember what the dish was that attracted so many people?
Yeah. Great question. I actually made little sandwiches. They were little sandwiches with some, different things in there, and
kept it simple.
And lollies and just simple stuff, but people appreciated it.
Yeah, lovely. Oh, brilliant. So tell me a bit more about. So what's it been now, David? 3-4 years?
Yeah.
What
the community's been running.
What you planning next then? I mean, as much as you can plan in the year 2020.
Well, what I'm thinking now is I really want to take this up a level. Like everyone in Melbourne sort of knows what UX psychology is in the space, but I think it's about now going a bit more global. And I think through COVID, what's actually taught me is that not everything has to be physical. It's actually like it can be virtual. So I think more online learning and getting speakers internationally to help people in Australia. So that's step one. And that's been going well. We've run one already with Professor Agnes from Paris, and he facilitated a workshop for some mainly Australian designers and product people, which went really well. The second layer is going to be the podcast, and we're going to be launching that within a couple of weeks. We've got a couple of speakers lined up where we're going to be interviewing people in human behavior, design, and technology, and getting their thoughts. Very similar to this.
Awesome.
So I'm very excited about that.
I love it. So on your career journey, you took a big scary step, from a, organizational psychology into psychology and technology. And I imagine you've had to have a certain type of mindset to ensure that you're developing as a human, and you've got to be coachable along that way. And you've clearly been able to achieve that. what is it around, reflecting on your first week, month, and year in a completely new space from educate what you purely studying in education? What is it around that coachability that you think was particularly important to your success and maybe to others?
It's a great question around the coachability aspect, right? That's what I hear. That word gets thrown around a lot. I suppose, well, if I go back to what made me become more coachable, it was actually quite a big failure in my career. So what happened was I started a law degree for the wrong reasons. And then I didn't end up finishing a law degree because it just wasn't suited to the way I thought, the way that I am, which is quite creative. And that's why I think design and psychology has helped me in that space. So it's allowed me to grow with it, right? And it was right for me. But being coachable, I suppose, that moment, choosing that degree and then not finishing that degree, made me see that I had to be coachable if I wanted to get where I wanted to go, because what I'd been doing in the past hadn't worked, right? So I'm a big believer of, you know what you know, and then there's other things that other people know about you, but then there are things that are unknown, right? And that's totally unknown. But you can learn a lot from other people that you don't know. And that's where your blind spots are, right? And I think we've spoken a bit about this in the past, right? It's really interesting. They're your blind spots. And over the years, people have sort of been able to help me and coach me and see things that I'm not able to see, which has allowed me to grow and develop. And I just think that's a really essential skill for everyone, right? I think being coachable like that, it just helps you grow and develop in different areas that you wouldn't think were possible.
No, you touched on some really good points. When I think back through my own career, I was very fortunate to join a great startup. 27, 28 years old, have some fantastic success. And I would actually say around the age of 30 to 31, out of my youth and arrogance of finding success in a product and living a great story, I was actually uncoachable, and I had no idea of that at the time. But when I look back, I see almost a plateau in performance there, and when I think about coachability as a concept, as how does that wrap up into how I was performing, behaving, and going about my day really, and because of that, I'd actually say now probably more coachable than ever. And I think that's really important, is to remain malleable. In this day and age, you've just got to. You can master anything, and it probably won't be here in 5 to 10 years unless it's something purely fundamental. But in our industry, etc., it's really the principles that will survive, and everything else around that is going to change. And so, yeah, it's certainly, I wish I was giving this conversation thought back at the age of sort of 30 to 32, 33 years old. Definitely. So random question for you.
That. Yeah.
No, yeah. Pleasure. For anyone else who's 27 to 30 years old and made it very successful, don't be a dick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So if you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
So this is a great segue from what we were just talking about. But if what I'd say is, you never lose, you either win or learn. And that was a Nelson Mandela quote, right? So you never lose, you either win or learn. And I think that there is really, really important, right? No matter what happens, and you might fail at law, right? Or you fail at your product, or you fail at your business. The podcast I've got may fail, like whatever, right? All that is just learning, right? It's but it could also win, right? And if you see life like that, it doesn't become a chore. It actually becomes really exciting. It becomes really exciting, especially when I start to doubt myself, for example. It's like, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? But it's like, no, who cares? Like, I'm either going to make it, or I'll learn something from it. Who cares what other people think about me? And I don't really mind, So that's why that quote really sings strong for me.
Would it be your face or Nelson's face?
No, I don't know. Put maybe mine and Nelson's face. I don't know. No. You wouldn't believe I've had that quote on my Facebook page since, that's been with me now for probably well over 6 years. I think it's been, you can choose a cover. And it's just been the quote that stuck there. And every time I've gone to change it, I've been like, I think I'm going to leave that. It's still very much my thing, So.
Yeah. What a man. What a man.
I know.
You think about the wins and learnings he went through in life. Wow. So lastly, let's go Melbourne on this final weird question. Where would you slap this billboard up in? Any intersections that stand out to you? Is a good billboard location to get your message out there?
That's a good question. Maybe in the centre of the city, like just over, that Flinders Street there. Just put it up
above the pub, Young and Jackson.
Above the pub there on that virtual board.
Nice.
I think that'd be perfect there.
Loads of exposure. Brilliant.
Can I throw it back at you? What would you put on a billboard? Sorry.
What would I put on a billboard? What would I put on a billboard? I feel like you were better prepared for that question than I was.
Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
What would I put on a billboard? Let's think. I think it would be, what is colour?
Ooh, what is colour?
Just having a look why I said that. I can't find the book. Oh, here it is. Sorry.
Are you ready your book on?
For those listening on the podcast, this is useless. But on the video, there's a book so I'm standing in an Airbnb, massive library in this Airbnb, which is amazing. And the book I've got here that I picked up as my go-to-bed material is the Classics of Western Philosophy. And first chapter is Plato and Meno having a chat, as they did in ancient Greece. Glass of red.
Wow.
And this is one of the questions that they're talking. They go like ultimate meta on me, and this blew my mind.
Wow.
What is colour? And they talk through. And then it's like, what is shape? And it's like, rectangle, square. No, they are A shapes. But what is shape? What is colour? And it just blew my mind. Yeah. And so that question has sat with me for about 2 weeks of how, after reading the answer in the book, but also how would I answer that? How would I put that into today's words or my words? And I brought it up with my 4-year-old daughter as a way of researching. How does a 4-year-old think about that question? What is colour? And she said red first. And I went, no, that's a colour. What is colour? And she went, paints. And so she's starting to think about the concept of how does colour get from a thing into your eye. I can see she's trying to draw those lines. And and it blew my mind. So, so there would be my thought-provoking question on a billboard at a set of traffic lights. Everyone's sitting there going, what is colour?
What is colour? Yeah.
Colour. There you go. That's going to keep you awake tonight.
I'm going to think about that one. Sorry to put you on the spot, but that was a good answer.
There we go. Nice. David, I've loved every single moment of chatting through with you today. Thank you so much.
Likewise, Jay. Thanks for having me on here.
Absolute pleasure. I'd love to do this again. Maybe we could start to talk about some patterns, some persuasion tactics, and go a bit deeper another day. That'd be cool, mate. Thank you so much to David Sipio for jumping in and sharing everything in this short amount of time we've had to talk about design and behaviour. It's been awesome. If you've enjoyed this episode, please remember that everything I'm doing here is to raise awareness and support for the bushfire affected communities, volunteer firefighters and wildlife of Australia following the 2019-2020 bushfires that devastated the country. So if you'd like to support either volunteer firefighters, the National Bushfire Fund, or the wildlife of Australia, please do so over at bushfire.productcoalition.com. Until the next episode, that's all from me. Thank you. Goodbye.